Much will be memorable about this year. What I really wanted to share was we are obviously in an era where our interconnectedness has been felt like never before. It's difficult to know, though, what will happen and what will make a difference in our world, but be intentional about it. Make a decision where you feel you can make a positive impact on people's lives. I know it looks dangerous out there, and I know the challenges may seem very great, but think of the opportunities to give back, the opportunities to help people who have been down and out because of this crisis, the opportunities for solutions, whether they're economic or health related, in the science fields. So many opportunities are out there. I'm really excited for you. You are going to have a great future. Aloha.
Veli Mānoa i ka lele aloha. Aloha ua tuahine. Mai lua hine ai. Kia i ke kahauhani. Kanino na leo. Eo kamaina. Aina aloha e. Mānoa. Okay, mahalo. Any of you want to say anything for Kumu Hedge Coke?
Nālama.
Mahalo, Kumu Hedge Coke, for all of the knowledge you shared with us. Appreciate it. Mahalo.
Aloha mai kākou. My name is Meleanna Meyer, and I've been asked to share a few thoughts from a visual artist's point of view about these times and what we're going through, and perhaps just share some mana'o about, for me, what's important to know now. And I have to say, what's important is that we stay informed, that we always seek truth, we get ourselves educated, and we take care of our families and community. And that, to me, is important because what is at stake, really, is our ability to make the needed changes that must happen as a consequence of not only the coronavirus, but in terms of the world being out of balance. This is not coincidental. This is a real fact, a real point of issue for everybody on the planet at this point. We really do need to think of our future in terms of generational truths, what we can keep for our children, what we can pass on to our grandchildren as we care for each other. I'm also thinking that, in a world out of balance right now, the stakes are very high. What we need to do is visualize and imagine different kinds of scenarios or settings that we all can participate in. Because as creatives, each and every one of us can choose a number of things, a number of avenues to go, and I actually choose na mea e kolu, 3 things: faith, hope, and love. I think with art, spirituality, and science, in terms of a triangulation of things, faith, hope, and love offers us that kind of opportunity to get our footing, to find our bearings, and to practice those things that are the most important for us in this time. And it's difficult. Let's not make light of it, because what we need to do as creatives is imagine and practice different kinds of things like care and empathy. If we haven't done enough of that, also to care for our beloved planet, because that's actually what this time and this pandemic to me is challenging me to do, is to reconsider how we live in the world for one another, and most of all, in relationship with our beloved Mother Earth. I'm excited because Indigenous knowledge systems of sustainability and reciprocity have always served us well, and these are things that we as creatives now can possibly even share. And I'm hopeful for that, that we can be intentional and that the work we do together can focus us in new ways. This is an image that I wanted to share, and it's called Seeding the World with New Visions. So take a moment and understand that the visual arts are like medicine. They can heal us. And so can the work that you do in your communities, in your families, not only to heal those closest and most beloved, but our beloved Earth as well. Thanks for listening.
Hafaday, aloha. My name is Craig Santos Perez, and I'm a Chamorro writer and professor here at the University of Hawaiʻi, Mānoa. I'm honored to be part of this virtual keynote by Allison Hedge. For many years, Allison has been one of my most important mentors and a poet who I've been inspired by. Through reading her work, I've learned about the power of poetry as narrative medicine, especially in these difficult times, that it gives us the strength and resilience to confront the trauma we're all facing and to hopefully find the courage to transform not only our lives but the broader society. And so I wanted to read a poem that I wrote during this pandemic, and it's called Contact Tracing, and I wanted to dedicate it to Allison. Contact tracing. I try not to touch my face while shopping at a crowded Costco. I'm lucky to still have a job, to afford food and rent in the most expensive place in the world to buy toilet paper. Today, the governor issued a work-from-home order. Community spread, panic. Yet thousands of tourists continue arriving aboard cheap flights and cruise ships, reservoirs of disease. Not even a pandemic can shut down paradise. Then I fill my car at the gas station, pick up my daughter's prescription pills and asthma inhaler at the drive-through pharmacy. I sanitize my hands after every errand. When I return home, my wife and daughter are playing dress-up. CNN echoes on the television 250,000 cases worldwide. I put away the groceries in the pantry and fridge, 10,000 deaths. Freeze enough meat to last a month. Bats and pangolins butchered. Disinfect handles and doorknobs, habitats destroyed. My mom calls. Sore throat. Just allergies, she reassures me. It's cold in California. I ask about Grandma, 92 years old, dementia. Her care home is quarantined, she answers. But if she dies, we aren't allowed to have a funeral service. Yet isn't grieving together our most essential business? Tomorrow, my mom says, I'll visit her, wave through the window, and I feel an ocean length apart, rising like an invisible tide. Our daughter falls asleep on the couch. Her body curls like a flattened curve. My wife takes her temperature, 99.5 degrees. How long can we shelter in place? How long can we shelter each other in a world where children can't play with friends at school, where elders can't breathe without ventilators, where we can't touch without fear? How long can we shelter a planet where there's no vaccine for the virulent outbreaks of human greed and violence. I want to hug my grandkids, my mom sighs, no longer able to hold our tears at a safe distance. Mahalo.
Aloha aina kako. Hawaii's history following Cook's arrival in Hawaii in 1778 is a history of disease, colonialism, and denial. In Before the Horror, the population of Hawaii on the eve of Western contact, David Stannard estimates the Hawaiian population dropped from an estimated 800,000 to 1 million in 1778 to just 40,000 in the year 1900. That represents a 96% decrease over a little more than a century following the introduction of various epidemics to which our kupuna lacked immunity. Most of this population collapse, an 80% decrease, occurred within the first 50 years alone. These statistics, however, are still unable to voice the lived reality of disease and devastation experienced by our ancestors who had to fight for their very survival while also fighting to retain their land, culture, language, and traditions amidst violent missionization and Americanization. Our colonial occupation has been a disease itself, one we've been working to recover from since we were first infected. Though I did not live in their time to directly experience what they did, that tremendous kaumaha, the weight of so much grief, it still has been passed down to me, to all of us. I have often doubted if I would be strong enough to continue living after enduring so many of my loved ones passing away so quickly, let alone seeing my country taken over and my culture so brutally silenced. The COVID-19 pandemic we're living through right now is so much less severe than the waves of disease and death our kupuna faced. But this experience reminds me to return to ancestral mo'olelo, to remember how powerful and transformative mo'olelo can be, and to continue creating new mo'olelo. One mo'olelo of our time could go like this. Today, we, as Kanaka, are a marginalized minority in Hawaii. Our lands and waters are constantly exploited and under assault, and we have been occupied by the United States for more than 100 years. And yet, I think of the other mo'olelo we are currently living right now, how the United States and the state of Hawaii have mishandled the COVID-19 pandemic, how so many of our supposed leaders continue to weigh profit and money over the lives of their people, how these governments struggle to provide even the most basic of needs, water, food, and a safe and comfortable place to live, to everyone, especially those who are considered most vulnerable. These would have been shameful stories for many leaders within Indigenous histories. How the real heroes of our time are healers, and not just doctors and other healthcare workers, but those who have chosen to help and protect our aina and our communities in any way they can. And then there's a mo'olelo of how humans sheltering in place and refraining from capitalistic consumerism has enabled Hawaii, especially Oahu, to recover environmentally, for all of the other living beings to grow and replenish after over 100 years of devastation. Haunani K. Trask has defined her project as a Kanaka writer, as resisting colonialism in order to heal. She has written, I write to resist, to tell my people how resistance feels, to guide them through our pain to the triumph of our vision. Every poem is an offering, sometimes in victory, often in sorrow. Words are spears or storms of light, or the chattering winds of hope. She would often talk about how she'd wake up depressed and how her activism was one of the only ways she could feel better. Her words remind me and remind all of us that the disease of American colonialism, while debilitating, need not be terminal. So long as there are words and breath enough to speak and write, people who continue to fight to protect our lands, waters, and our families. I want to share this short poem and dedicate it to Allison Hedge, to mahalo her for her time here, for all that she has given to our people and our students. and for her beautiful gift for telling stories that feed, heal, and inspire. This poem is called The History of This Place. Here there are no visible remnants impressing the grass, no ahu to mark the many passings to which this place bore witness, housing the salt of tears of bone under the canopy of kupu-kupu. There is only the spirit of memory that stirs the air, dark and heavy, like a broth strained from the living body of before, saturating the earth, the rain sinking the old grief, down deep, closer to the fire within. I share this poem, these mo'olelo, these stories we're living right now, to celebrate our healing and strength as keiki o keia pai'aina. The way we have always fed and healed ourselves has been through stories. Let us choose only the best, the most life-giving mo'olelo as our medicine. Mahalo.
E kunui a kea, lono nui a kea, kane nui a kea me kana loai. E uili mai iho. A po mai nā mamo ka hui a pili ana I ke kauna hua I ka loina o ke kupuna. Uvale ka ha ke a ka leo, kani ka ha, kani ke a, kani ka leo. Eia ka mana levo ka mele haku ai, lele vale aku la hoi, amama uanoi. This chant beckons our deities to descend and to be with us in our time of need, that they may respond to our breath, to our voice, to our life, and to our ever-present ability to create and compose. It is a testament to the power of our individual and collective narratives. My name is Noelle Kahanu, and I am an assistant specialist in American Studies at the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa. But I'm also a member of the committee of the Dan and Maggie Inouye Chair in Democratic Ideals. For the last 15 years, the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa has been home to the Dan and Maggie Inouye Chair, which honors the senator and his late wife, Maggie, for their lifetime of public service. The Inouye Chair aims to bring today's leading changemakers, artists, intellectuals, and other public figures to Hawaiʻi so that they may share their groundbreaking work with students in the broader community. I can think of no better person to help guide us through these extraordinary times than our Spring 2020 Dan and Maggie Inouye Chair in Democratic Ideals, Allison Hedge. Allison is a poet, memoirist, and activist of mixed heritage. She was raised in North Carolina, the Plains, and Canada, and worked horses, fields, waters, and factories. Today, she is a distinguished professor of creative writing at the University of California, Riverside, and narrative medicine in the UCR School of Medicine. She is the founder and director of the literary Sandhill Crane Retreat and the Along the Chaparral Project. Allison has authored 6 books of poetry, a memoir, and 10 edited anthologies, which have included numerous Kanaka Oiwi poets and others from throughout Moana Nui a Kea. Said Allison in her opening passage from Rock, Ghost, Willow, Deer, I descend from mobile and village peoples, interracial, indigenous, adventurous, and bold, none famous, none any more than humble means, though in this great ancestral river thoroughly bloodstream true. I am born from those so devoted to their beliefs and way of living they would eagerly choose to be memorialized through songs or stories of honored doings, or maybe through sharing a bit of tobacco on special occasions, rather than by accumulating material legacies in life. In many respects, Allison is a living contradiction. She is a tiny woman with a huge spirit, a gentle woman whose life and family have been shaped by crisis and trauma, by stillness and movement, by raging fires and running waters. She has borne witness to the unimaginable and emerged full of hope and grace. We are living in a time of our own contradictions, from a sheltered embrace to sheltering in place, when living aloha means living apart. If the handshake is dead, what of the honi, our intimate exchange of ha, our breath of life? Yet we have also been given an extraordinary gift to experience a world whose capitalist engine has been momentarily silenced. Across the globe, haze-laden city skies have turned blue as our oceans and mountains breathe. The greatest tragedy is if we wake up from this dream and pretend that it never happened. Allison Hedge is here to help us remember what we must never forget. In a keynote presentation that unites poetry and presence as a measure of narrative medicine in the midst of change. Mahalo to the Dan and Maggie Inouye Chair in Democratic Ideals for having the foresight to bring to us in these most extraordinary of times, Allison Hedge. Mahalo.
I want to start by saying thank you to everyone at the University of Hawaii for bringing me here. I especially want to say thank you to Kanaka Maoli people for allowing me in this space and to share the aina while I'm here. I really have a lot of respect for it and the people, and I feel honored to have been invited. This is making our measure, our motion in life. Cedar behavior. Encyclopedic entry unavailable for Travis. Tremble in cedar bough, steady, soft, shake. Neither of us knew, still we speculated. Squirrel, owl, woodpecker, until the shake grew wilder, rough. I circled while you waited, under Ramada witnessing. Still no clue gave way to reason until, just like that, cedars on either side leaned back like humans, then sprung forward, fast, arduous center, toward trembling, releasing pollen. In a mesmerizing green cloud, fully permeating the space surrounding the trio, while the trembler eased back into herself, still and shattered, what we thought we knew of trees. This happened once. It was unexpected to see trees mate, to witness this. Upon sharing with Karita Coffee, the potter, she said no one else would have noticed that the attention a poet puts into everything outside themselves is what they allowed me and us to perceive. And perceiving is not necessarily an individual action, is it? Sometimes we perceive collectively as well. Here, at this time, my eldest son, Travis, also a writer and poet, was with me under the Ramada when it began and came to fruition. The truth is that perception is the basis of knowing and the base element of a poem as well, what is with us. Most of us are missing from this room now, and yet we're here through collaborative arrangement. In the pandemic, making arrangements is a necessary feat. The heart of coexistence largely depends on the mind of concerned cooperation and willingness to be and to allow beingness. Consider the openness of this room here. It's like a cloud of sorts. something that holds the impossible and much more than it seems able to bear. And when it moves to collect itself from disparate elements, it becomes full and releases all it carries in a matter of time. This room too is full. Through perception, we are educated to focus, and that reduces all that's here and what it actually holds. There's breath here, life. There's future. There is memory. There's peace. There's clarity. In this time, we are moved to make way for one another and to collectively come together to speak of intersections in a world gone awry. It's gone awry many times since industrialization began and since the Western Hemisphere suffered the first invasive slaughters, and how as poets, we moved through this. Ecological violence and violence against women are inextricable. The earth, our mother, grandmother, and we too, an element of nature, am representative of her as well. The same is true of ecological violence and violence against children, people with differences, disabilities, seniors, elders, marginalized people, including ecological violence and colonial and empirical violence and racial violence, and on so. These co-related violences demonstrative of control, of power, of resourcing, resource hoarding, of privileged greed and cruelty are killing us, have set us on fire. They flood our planet and make us weak, ill, fearful. They carry deathly threats in each new reveal, like this virus. And yet, we need not fear that which intends to harm us. We need not give in to it. We need to respect it and treat it accordingly, to stay safe, to keep our distance. And we need to get busy and take action, inform and cause change, to compel and restore and reverse, to disempower that which is meant to kill us with the same intensity we imagine ourselves jumping into action to save our students, our colleagues, our family or friends, and perfect strangers from being killed when an active shooter appears with intent. And sometimes we do this in verse. For a poet, calling for consideration, for awareness, for attention to a thing that is fully harboring a second nature. It is the poet's landscape and lake. It's where we dwell and free ourselves. If a document can cause us to be controlled, to be killed, if someone signing something can cause the world to go awry, no matter how slow, from whatever the environmental disaster being brewed with resourcing and legislated against us, if a signature stroke on printed text can do this legally, a poem might undo and move the hearts and minds of many to manifest dignity for life that the earth calls us to muster in these times. And muster we must, for the face of the planet, the wings of sky, the template of water, for each and every being, animate and inanimate, we must. When my grandchildren join me to speak to power, just as my parents raised me to consider, we move through time, motion and continuum, and carry this with us through our generations, our lineages, who refuse to be easily killed. We will not be. When our songs, our lyrics, our narrative verse bring us to unite, to witness beauty before us, to respect life, and to also indict what would do us harm, we deliver a possibility into the world of strength and clarity. We share a bit of the curious nature that calls upon us to write to begin with, our passions, our concerns, our nuances of what is glorious in the world, our lives, our dreams, and what endangers all that exists as we know it. This is a time we must unravel what would otherwise surely choke us and deliberate with all we have in the bare essence of our own power. We must write, must find our way into knowing exactly how we might lend our voice, our strength, our own power, to the gathered resistance so that together we may be able to release our forces to topple and denounce the construction of destruction that we are existing and surviving through now. It's truly the greatest act of a poet in a poem to move oneself through what appears empty, gathering all the disparate elements, filtering, manifesting, and gaining momentum, to fulfill oneself, so delivery can replenish, with release scented with life. The connections of the following are made obvious in this time of our great pause. Everything is on hold at the moment, except what's been happening in the world that we haven't attended to. And even now, the plants and animals are in a better place with us still. 30 to 50% of all living species are targeted for extinction by the mid-21st century currently. 99% is due to human activity, the thoughtless and careless activity encroaching on and devastating habitat and changing the biosphere at a rate that's untenable for life on Earth. In the 1930s, following intentional extinction efforts made by settler colonists in the Americas, the sandhill crane and whooping cranes, once so numerous, annual migrations darkened the sky. There were millions. They were taken down to 5 breeding pair each. When their staging grounds were protected, when the annual crane councils take place on the Platte River, and all the doings of the species are mitigated for that coming year, where their mating dances are held and the young cranes paired off to potential mates and assigned to follow a guidance from their parents that year to learn that migration course and where and how to nest, how to forage to feed, how to navigate their nest from endangerment and towards safer routes in migration. Once the riparian staging area was protected again, was returned, their numbers also returned, and today range at about 600,000 sandhill cranes. Nowhere near the original numbers, but a significant return. One that allows 7 to 10 million other birds who travel with them as guard birds to flourish, protected as well. On the river, and remember, water is life. A new U.S. advisory board, the International Wildlife Conservation Council, created by the current administration in D.C., to help rewrite federal laws to import the heads and hides of African elephants, lions, and rhinos, is stacked with trophy hunters, including some members with direct ties to the president and his family. Former Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke indicated they would agree with his position that the best way to protect critically threatened or endangered species is by encouraging wealthy Americans to shoot some of them. And that's a direct quote. March 2020 is the first March in 18 years that there were no school shootings in America because the schools in America were moved online. Apparently, the only way to keep kids from being shot at school while learning is to have them out of school. Our kids are endangered. CBS News notes that given the spike in sales, gun safety advocates fear students are not only facing more dangerous situations at home, but could also face major increase in shootings when they return to school. This is a direct quote. When this pandemic ends and we emerge from physical distancing reality, the guns will remain. And the quote comes from Guns Down America Executive Director Igor Volsky. He continues, will there be increased mass shootings after school shootings, shootings at home, at work, at concerts? In 1 year on average in the U.S., 15,700 American children and teens are shot in murders, assaults, suicide, and suicide attempts. Unintentional shootings are by police. 3,000 die by gun violence. 1,770 youth ages 0 to 19 are murdered. 1,129 are lost to suicide. There's 110 counted unintentional deaths, 40 killed by law enforcement annually, 53 died with intents unknown. We can think of Pulse, Las Vegas, Parkland, and Onso to count score on the gun violence in the U.S. And think of the wars in Syria, Iran, etc., war on war on war. In general, in 2000, there were about 276,000 natural gas wells in the United States. By 2010, the number almost doubled to 510,000. This according to the U.S. Department of Energy, DOE. And every year, about 13,000 new wells are drilled. According to a 2014 study, the last one I could come up with, at least 15.3 million Americans lived within a mile of a fracking well that's been drilled since 2000. In 2000, there were about 276,000 natural gas wells in the U.S. Remember this. Living within fracking well distance, living next door to pipelines that ruin water, living in the continental and captured territories of the United States puts all residents in the United States territories at risk for resourcing. In the Amazon, south of Turtle Island, a tiny group of uncontacted people teeters on the brink of extinction. They're forced to live on the run, to flee violence from outsiders, and attacks and disease kill their relatives. Loggers are close by with machine guns and machetes, always resourcing. And their genocide will be complete unless the land is protected and returned. Indigenous people number over 300 million, inhabitants of practically every main biome of the earth, and especially of the least disturbed terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems of the world. On April 9th, 2020, a Yanomami teen died of COVID-19. He was the first person from a remote tribe in Brazil known to die from the virus. He'd been turned down at a clinic for help with his flu-like symptoms. 10,000 illegal gold miners camped nearby. Any one of them could bring any number of illnesses. By April 14th, at least 5 Amazonia people had died in Brazil. The audacity of missionaries in the time of global pandemic, whose genocidal practices of entering into indigenous peoples' lands and waters with potential contagions, had to be stopped by a Brazilian federal judge. Fabiano Verli, who, as The Guardian notes, banned 3 missionaries, Andrew Tonkin, Josiah McIntyre, and Pastor Wilson de Benjamin, from the reserve, along with the controversial missionary group, the New Tribes Mission of Brazil, which recently bought a helicopter to convert isolated people in the region during a pandemic. Concerns for their safety soared when the former New Tribes missionary was actually put in charge of Funai's isolated Indigenous department. It was non-citizens and non-members who brought the first cases of COVID-19 to Pine Ridge Reservation and to the Eastern Band of Cherokees recently. Roberto Oriana reports that there are just under 3,000 confirmed cases, with data from only 22 states reporting Indian country confirmed cases of COVID-19. And at least 88 reported deaths from the data, with only 12 states willing to report, which are native deaths. According to the Navajo Department of Health, as of Wednesday, April 22nd, the nation has 1,282 positive cases and 49 deaths, in a total of 9 counties in 3 states and tribal territory. Deneta. Such is the news from Turtle Island. America Samoa has no official testing facility, and test samples are processed a long distance from origin, diminishing any possibility of efficiency in testing. When I last checked, there were 596 cases in Hawai'i and 389 in Honolulu, and 12 deaths. Despite searching, I was unable to locate how many Kanaka-Maoli may have tested positive. There are 2,794,000 COVID-19 positive cases this morning in a global sense, with 194,644 dead globally. There are 37,369 confirmed cases, with 1,469 dead in California today. 43,552 confirmed in Canada, with 2,294 dead. In New York City alone, over 150 confirmed and 11,544 dead. Instead of providing PPE to frontline healthcare workers and ventilators for patients unable to breathe through the course of infection, administration has offered that its citizens might inject disinfectants, might place tremendous UV light inside the body, might liberate themselves from quarantines placed to keep them safe from contagions. And as they say, you cannot make this stuff up. We're in a global collective grief right now. It is ongoing, it is continuous, and it carries uncertain futures for all. People around the world are recalling epidemics that have preceded original peoples, recall the actualities of ancestral genocides through invasive introductions of disease, alongside this period of pandemic we are situated in today. Water is life, remember. In the 1980s, Inouye began as a water project, claiming rights to waters the legally blocked tribes in South Dakota. The elders, in council with one another, came forward with the reference, the tagline, the title, to offer to the activist attorneys involved. And decades later, despite outside ideas of what Native stories are, this is in and of itself a story of great significance for Lakota people, for those involved and for their descendants. The statement continues to be relevant, and the youth at Standing Rock in 2016 widely employed it to gather protectors for the waters from the Cannonball Creek to Lake Hawai'i to the Missouri, and all the way down the tributaries and stream of its flow, the Mississippi, the Gulf, and to the oceans. It continues to invoke a necessary attention to the realness of our need for water, for life. Everyone here from this Aina, Kanakama'oli, from Kupuna to Keiki, you have my deepest admiration and visceral support in protecting the lands here in these islands and all the waters and all their sacred spaces, whether they be pummeled and poisoned by artillery, or in the case of Mauna Kea, a sacred place, unnecessarily defiled seat of sky, the tallest mountain of the world, wrongfully constructed upon and desecrating the place. I want to heartily recommend the short film, Like a Mighty Wave, by Mikey Inouye, a young and brilliant filmmaker, and following the Kupuna-led stand, the Camp Kia'i, the Mauna Medic and Healers Hui, and the work and media Pu'u Honua o Pu'u Hulu Hulu puts to the public. If we do not protect the platforms of our world, we rob her of her vital organs and her features, such as Mauna Kea, and we continue to complicate her ability to function in the world, to breathe for us. What happens in the Indigenous worldview that is bereft outside of it? In the application of sustenance of the nurture-to-nurture system of Indigenous peoples, whereas you gift equally as you receive, particularly from other life forces and from the planet as an embodied life force, so actual the multi-directional sustenance is always seeking and always restoring balance and plentitude to foster an environmental understanding that continues to give back, to replenish. Let's take a moment now for understanding our measure in life through contemplation, through dedication, through active living, and application of creative ways in balancing innovation and activism. Then what can we as writers, as artists, as thinking people do to make certain impact while reciprocating each gift we receive and balancing our own lives with craft and offering, with the same concern that we could generate toward our points of active intention for the planet. The Free Dictionary says that to measure up is to be equal to something or someone of sufficient quality that you have as a goal in mind to achieve. And to feel that we are, our lives are, our talent are, living up to our level of acting in the world and being worthy to give a sufficient quality of ourselves that when it all comes down, we leave knowing what we did the best that we could to make each place a better place than we entered into, to improve it during our stay, or at least leave what was measurably good in the same condition we met it and respect that without doing any harm, especially irreversible harm. Of all the points of concern on the planet we hope and intend to speak to in our lives, to support and to bring an end to abolish and to care for, to be custodians of, stewards of, to fight for, in identifying our intentionality, our strategy towards serving our personal or collective points of concern, we muster enough gumption to seek solutions beyond the cause to solve the dilemma, to love the solution as much as the cause so we can move for solution and move forward, to understand our motivations clearly and not to allow ego to get in the way of the work. In seeking a very deep reflection and contemplation in introspective, respective, innovative, and creative means, to muster with, to become the fingers to the hand, the wheels to the cart, the voice to the mouth. The quality of being dedicated or committed to task or purpose and dedicating to our duties is one of the greatest essences of balance that I know. It's readily available to use. The sense of everything is material. This knowing allows us to cope in ways that others may not be able to function through right now or at other times. A warrior has a similar function, while in the heat of matters, as does a leader in peace and negotiation. They're one and the same. Every single element crossing our pathways is available as material to solve, to represent, and to demonstrate, to be useful to a greater purpose at any time. Silence, song, a scrap of paper, a letter, a number, a road, an endangered plant, animal, biome, a weapon, any critical example of something malleable or not. Every single element in any scene that we find ourselves in as human beings, as witnesses of issues and injustices on this planet, can be made a component, even in an imaginary sense, a metaphor, anecdotal use, in symbol and sign, in our work to do more and to serve more in our lifetime. It is also the stuff of humor, and allowing ourselves to see the immense ridiculousness, the absurdity of these problems in our world, of our species, most of which most of us would agree are all avoidable and would be by collectively attending to a thinking culture that intends to share the planet indefinitely. We all know that corruption in political and social spheres and economics are set up with such inconsiderate, diabolical endangerments for most living creatures and for our host, our Mother Earth. And we have done so for far too many eons in our species. And that if we held our own composure, held together beyond the capitalization and raging colonization on the earth, surely our issues would be diminished incredibly. We need a new system. Knowing this and seeking to find ways to ensure our capacity of human beings to move to this end will not only find solutions and replace offenders with better management, but will return Indigenous spaces to Indigenous people to steward for themselves, would also allow humanity the reprieve to search for the self, for complicity, and to alleviate our symptomatic issues and replace them with healthy choices, to put it lightly. And in this too, we begin to see in such a way that our own worth and our merit, rather than being in an ego trade, a conceit, becomes material we might work with to further ideas and goals in motivating restoration of our environments, and to finally turn ourselves into a beingness on the planet of healthiness and lead us to offer this wherein we work and live, and definitely where we travel to when we're able, and to reach inward more than we reach outward. In seeking creative ways to balance innovation and activism while living actively, while being engaged and holding consciousness in all that we do. Holding dear to the fact that we certainly have a part in all, And we do. And we make a choice to allow ourselves to be material too, to be useful, to offer, to be a portion of the collective effort, and even to share our breath with all surrounding life forms who can truly give us merit if we consider ourselves a part of it versus apart from our world and all its gloriousness and all its pain. We're inextricable. What does it mean to be inextricable from your surroundings, to be a part of our conservation and efforts for each measurable moment upon the platform of the planet to count, random or not? What does it mean to hold kinship at all times? Each footstep intentionally placed with care upon our mother bestows a walk that is permeated with balance and grace in the world. Cultures who do this remain the best stewards for the biomes remaining and for those we might reclaim and replenish if we give pause to them, if we leave them, allow them to restore. And by insisting criteria exist within individual and community actions that protects them, inclusive of local original peoples' determinations. It also assures that the world has a chance, due to our understanding of our place upon her, and with consideration can become something that becomes contagious to help through the efforts of our creative works and stands, our activism, our presence, our allowance that we make to ensure a mutual respect between ourselves and the planet we live with, and contemplation regarding what an honor it is to be here. Our sense of regard is essential for our world and for our sense of balance and understanding upon her. And in the end, we must too realize our limited, frail humanness and our frailties and faults, and where we as witnesses deal with our shortcomings and further our understanding of selves through the parallels we find in life and search for meaning in the happenstance, just as in the researched and sought after journeys we partake. The focus on the seemingly mundane, the oftentimes neglected, overlooked, or turned away from significant factors or elements, and so much more in the deeper consciousness collective on Earth, no matter the species of life and our connectedness and meaning within our walk. The solutions to our deepest searches and our meanderings might be beside us at any given moment if we allow ourselves the ability to be seers, to take time to realize what we are seeing and unseeing, and to work with each entry we meet and engage in timelessness, as temporal knowns may or may not persuade us to. There is no reason in too busy. Our life plays out before us just as we co-create every scene. The actuality is all perspective and in knowing. And in the end, we can sum it up by departures far more than arrivals of any knowns or actions. In the end, balance is what we've all been searching for. To some end, it is our meaning. A month ago, when we began a stay-at-home policy of lockdown, I had no idea what to do the first day. So I began posting daily poem prompts for the pandemic exercises with that hashtag, for all levels and abilities to have some initiative, a jump start to write through this time, to have a way to cope. And though now it may be difficult to think of this as a time, it's certainly a time signature and a change for the planet, a new way of thinking for us. The prompts were something I could offer without any materials other than my mind, things I already know. And in each and every offering we make, the sake of coping helps us as much as it helps someone else. It helps us heal. It helps us see. It helps us to come to clarity. The sharing in the sake of knowing, of consideration for the collective that makes us whole, we play a part in, will continue beyond us and others. And in so much, we meet a measure of the day, together jointly. I call upon you now, I call upon all of us, to consider what we make a difference and where we generate healing and coping, the shared knowledge, And I call upon you to bring your own gifts forward. They're needed now. And allow yourself to become who you really are. I'm going to close with a few poems. The first one is called Measuring Up. Thank you for listening. It's odd to have this presentation going on in the way that it's happening now, and I appreciate you tuning in, and thank you for sharing space with us. This is Measuring Up. It wasn't socks missing from his feet, nor the elbow cloth unraveled unilaterally. It wasn't the equal displacement of his chin or brow, nor the eye that sat a little bit lower on the right. It was his knuckle that made me weep. The clove corners went wayside like minuscule meat hooks, clawed away bits of him, each shift he had made, invisible there in a timelessness unfurled. It was his muscle torn through, festering, prosthetic hand, the finger with dismay, all across his somewhat attempted grin. He was left there just like that, a body, for anyone to see. It was his mercy in the end. And in the end, we're rarely beautiful. We're mostly placed away from compromising situations and poses, offsetting what has become of us in some gawker's unnerving eyes. And yet he was and is still here in mine. And I'm human because of it, maybe. Maybe only, maybe. And this next poem is for one of my Hunka sons. It's called 16 after 2016, and it's dedicated to Edwin Tuigo and for the Ocheti Shonkowi. It was prayer song gathering morning, the horses nuzzling, each break light of day. Bullet rubber in my cheek, I pretended water tasted relief. No, I'm not broken, though the numbers blight my forearm, showing slatted light through dog crate. Indelible insinuating count, not a coup. Bait the governor's hate washed over, just like lake where you first drowned. And even now, nothing stills the rise and fall of our collective careful breath. All of this because nothing slakes thirst when water floats fully bloated black snakes, each tap draw. If they kill us now, everyone who ever died to give us life, this string beaded red white ends with no beginning. No, we are rising. Rise each offense they bring, every greed wrung motion. We heal, we dream this dream back when. We are those before us. Their blood is our own, our home. It was prayer, song, gathering,